folks, welcome back to my channel. Today we're back to continue with our series where we've been talking about the books that have won the Man Booker Prize in its history. Today we're here to discuss the sixth book that won the Booker Prize, and this is The Siege of Krishnapur by J.G. Farrell. This book was published and won the award in 1973, and it's the second book in J.G. Farrell's Empire Trilogy, in which he explores the decline of British rulership across its empire. This one is set in India in a fictional town called Krishnapur, and it describes the uprising of Indian natives against British rulership that happened in 1857. The novel opens with a description of a desert landscape, complete with the unfriendly environmental conditions that a visitor would encounter, especially if one is not familiar with the climatic conditions in India. And it also describes the social hierarchy that existed, portraying the abject life of the Indian native compared to the lifestyle of these British settlers who would describe themselves as saints as they suffer through the oppressive heat of this Indian landscape. However, it's not long before we see evidence that this social hierarchy is not completely acceptable to the Indian natives, who begin a very passive at first resistance by placing chapatis or little bread or roti in very unusual places so that ants will invade the British territory in a way that the humans themselves cannot, or at least not at first. Over time, however, the sepoys, who were the Indian native soldiers who were initially armed by the British militia, turned against the leaders who once commanded them and have now sequestered these British residents in the middle of the town where they once enjoyed their magnificent finery, imitating the lives of Indian royalty and living in these administrative buildings that would seem like palaces. Now they find themselves still in those buildings in a state of decline, and with the men who once catered to their whims and fancies and protected them on the outside now have their weapons aimed towards them. The plot follows this battle and shows the resistance put up by these high society men and women who found themselves surrounded in the middle of the town, and their comical attempts at maintaining their cultured lifestyle even as they're forced to eke out a survival, and the prejudices that they continue to hold on to, and if and how they're eventually defeated and by what means. Over the course of 375 pages, author J.G. Farrell shows us the very different kinds of social relationships that existed in this time and place, with a small glimpse into how they were established and how the present situation of the uprising with the Siege of Krishnapur, how it affected those relationships. So we start off by observing the servile circumstances that the Indians occupied in relation to the British settlers, but also we observe the change in their attitudes, in their demeanor, and how the relationships led to the uprising in the first place. We get a chance to observe different British families and how they relate to other members of their family, but also how they relate to other family members, whether they see themselves as superior or inferior to them. We see the prejudices that they harbor, and how these people who believe that they are high society, how they relate to their fellow countrymen who they believe are displaying unfavorable behaviors. We get to see the prejudices that exist between people of the same social class, but who observe others in a very different way based on their own preconceived ideas. We see interactions between different levels of British officials and government. There's even a religious aspect where we meet a Roman Catholic priest and a Protestant clergyman, and we get to observe the relationship between these two men who should be professing the same religion and make comparisons with how religion is practiced by these Indian natives. Through these various observations, the author invites the reader to a light-hearted reflection on very serious historical topics, with maybe a view to understanding whether when British Empire eventually fell, whether it was a cause of mutiny and resistance from the colonies, or how much of the decline was based on the inability of the settlers to agree on anything. So I found The Siege of Krishnapur to be a delightfully titillating novel, and the author gives so much detail in every paragraph that even on my second read, I felt like maybe I didn't uncover all the nuances that were expressed in this book. And I feel like if I read this a third time, I would find things here to enjoy that I didn't see in my first or second read. So I highly recommend this one, and with my recommendation, some advice that if you're going to pick this book up, that you allow yourself the time and space to fully immerse yourself into this story so you can truly soak up all the atmospheric details that the author is trying to communicate through these pages. So The Siege of Krishnapur is the second book in J.G. Farrell's Empire trilogy. The first book, entitled Troubles, talked about the Irish fight for independence, and the third book, which I haven't read yet, is The Singapore Grip, which details, of course, the experience in Singapore right before the invasion by Japan. The Siege of Krishnapur won the 1973 Man Booker Prize, and I'll be talking about the 1974 winners in my upcoming videos. In 1974, the prize was shared between The Conservationist by Nadine Gordimer and Holiday by Stanley Middleton. So I'll be talking about those in upcoming videos. I hope you'll join me then. But thanks for watching this video. Give me a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see more. Let's talk in the comments. I'd love to hear from you if you've read this book, or if I said something in this video that makes you interested to pick this one up. This is a book that, even though it was published over 45 years ago, I think is still as significant and relevant to read today as it was in 1973. So I hope you'll pick it up. I'd love to talk with you in the comments about it. So let's talk down there, and until next time, happy reading. Bye.